So welcome everybody. So we're going to start. So I'm Nicholas Zylberglajt. I'm one of the founders and president of the European Young Innovators Forum. So we have put together today this webinar that we call WeStandTogether, United Through Innovation. The main purpose of this webinar today is really to bring together different ecosystem enablers and partners that we have been working together all across this month and these years to discuss what are the future, what is the future looking like for us, and what are also the opportunities for collaboration at the European level. So this is why we have brought together today very good speakers that are representing different key actors of the ecosystem that I will be presenting in a bit. So just to start, what you see in the next slide, you see that we are, what do we do at EYIF? So at EYIF, we are one of the leading foundations for youth innovation in Europe. Yeah, we are one of the 12 Startup Europe ambassadors, and we have been around for, now we're celebrating our 10th anniversary, and we're very happy to be contributing and be one of the drivers in this European tech ecosystem. So in the next slide, you will see a bit everything that we have done in the last 10 years. So every year we have been engaged in different actions. This is for you just to have a snapshot, but let's go to the next slide and present a bit what we have been doing in the last few months. One of our key programs has been supporting women founders to connect them with mentors and investors in different European countries. We have been in 2019 to 9 different cities. And have engaged at the different levels with them. So, and we're very proud of this, and we are very proud in championing this matter. So today, what we would like to discuss is one of our other webinars that we have put together. We have done different type of webinars since the coronavirus was exploded. What we want to do with this specific webinar today is to talk to the ecosystem enablers and to give very clear best practices that have been put together. So today, 60 minutes, we have an introduction with the European Commission that will present the different funding opportunities that will be available for the ecosystem enablers in the next budgetary period. I will tell you, Razvan, explain how the European Union budget works. So it works every 7 years. So the next 7 years will be decided hopefully in the months to come, and will start from 2021 onwards. So what are the opportunities that will be there? And then we have 3 key actors in the ecosystem, in the European tech ecosystem. So we have one of the leading conferences in the Nordic region. Then we have one of the with Juliana Geller, who is head of marketing of TechBBQ. Then we have one of the leading startup associations in Europe, Fenart from France Digitale. Hello, Julia. And also we have Sandra Golbreich from the Baltic Sandbox, that is an accelerator, also an investment company. And of course, we have Razvan Anistoroaei, who is replacing Isidro, who had a last-minute obligation from the European Commission, and representing also the EIC, European Innovation Council and Ecosystems unit, and is working on how to enable better and more sustainable ecosystems in Europe. So welcome everybody. And also welcome Razvan. The way that we will structure is that we'll start with you, Razvan, giving us a snapshot on how this is looking like for the years to come. So the floor is yours. Razvan, tell us what is the vision of the European Commission for the ecosystems in the years to come. Razvan, you are in mute. Yeah.
Mute.
Yeah.
Okay, so good morning or almost afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Nicholas. I apologize for Isidro. It was actually about this. It's about meeting the program committee. It's about shaping the future work programming for 2021, as you said, 2027, where Isidro is. So that's why I'm here. Now, what Europe is thinking or what Europe is doing about the innovation ecosystem is something quite novel, because this so-called innovation ecosystem terminology or structure or package, it has never been appearing in any of the previous work programs and in any of the previous concepts. So as you might know, the Horizon Europe, which is actually the framework program 9, called now Horizon Europe, is organized in 3 main pillars. Usually these pillars were pretty much similar. This one is similar to the previous organization on 3 pillars with societal challenges, with excellent science, industrial leadership, and so on. Nevertheless, this Horizon Europe has this special pillar on innovation, and this pillar has the European Innovation Council, the EIC, which existed in a form of a pilot. If you are probably familiar with the Horizon 2020 types of fundings, it was already done via accelerator, pathfinder, and other type of actions. That was so-called the EIC pilot. Now it's put in a whole structure which requests pretty much more than 10 billion euro for the next framework program. Then is the EIT, which also existed in the previous framework program. And the novelty is this innovation ecosystem. What is innovation ecosystems doing is actually enabling connectedness. So it's connectedness between both inside the pillar between the EIC, EIT, and other ecosystem builders, but also with other structures and entities from the other pillars of the Horizon Europe. So it's an overall enabler, so to say, of all actors that can contribute and build up to the innovation ecosystem.
So thank you, Razvan. And so for everybody's clarity, and in the Horizon Europe is the main financial instrument that the European Union has to fund innovation, science, and entrepreneurship. And for the first time, in all these decades, they have created a specific budget line to fund ecosystem enablers and to fund also actions that will connect and make the ecosystem stronger all across Europe. So thank you for that. And please tell us how was the process to create that. I know that you have been very active in the co-creation of the priorities that should be approved in the months to come. Can you tell us a bit how did that work? How did you come up with the priorities and what you would like to fund?
All right, so first of all, let's think of innovation and innovation ecosystems. And we always thought in the logic of the 3 C's plus a D. So the 3 C's is competence, capital, and connectedness, plus the D from diversity. And you mentioned a bit earlier that you have some actions enabling women innovators, and we also have that. So that is number 1. So thinking all the time around these 3 C's, we organized a series of consultations during 3 months from November to February. When we had the final conference, we had a participatory workshops with all the, or I would say all the major actors in the innovation ecosystems. We had universities representatives, we had startups association and startups, we had the venture capitals, we had investors, we had ministries, cities, regions. So all these bigger or smaller actors, which are actually the cornerstones of the innovation ecosystems. And we actually gathered all of them separately and tried to skim out what exactly are the needs, what are the challenges in enabling ecosystems development, innovation ecosystem development, and so on. So then we had a final big conference where everybody was there, and From there, we have a report, and probably this report will be available also to you. It will be publicly disseminated, a report made by us together with the stakeholders on innovation ecosystems and on how the challenges that the actors of the innovation ecosystems are facing can be translated into actions that the commissions via the Horizon Europe program, particularly innovation ecosystems, let's say, can address these challenges and can enable these actions. So pretty much it has been a consultative process most of the time. We had 8 categories of stakeholders, quite big, and then other type of stakeholders, maybe a bit smaller, that were not consulted in the form of a workshop. So generally speaking, let's say we focused on 3 elements, on these 3 C's plus a D, or 4 elements basically. And what it has occurred the most proeminent, let's say, the connectedness. The connectedness is the most important. Capital nowadays is not any longer such a big issue as it used to be, like, let's say, 20 years ago. Competencies and talent, again, it exists. Now is a matter of connecting them, connecting this talent, connecting competence to where is needed and how is needed.
Yes, and I want to thank you very much. It was very clear. So the three C's and D. I think that today I would like us to focus on the connectedness part. I think that is very important for everybody attending here. What are the priorities that you think will be guiding this connectedness part? What are the type of actions? We have read that the overall budget should be around 500 million.
Requested budget.
Exactly, requested budget. It all depends on the approval process. But how do you see this being allocated, in particular in the connectedness part? Yeah, what should our ecosystem enablers, our network partners be expecting there?
All right. It is. I have to confess that it's a little bit difficult to say exactly in terms of numbers what is going to be allocated to connectedness. Like, generally speaking, what we see in connectedness is actually connecting the existing ecosystems. Europe is fragmented in terms of ecosystems. We do have very good ecosystems for innovation, but they are very scattered. And we do not consider actually that this is a bad thing in itself. We don't necessarily aim to have a Silicon Valley per se, because this comes with all other type of societal challenges or social issues, and this is not really the interest of Europe to go there. We want to see how best we can connect these existing ecosystems that are scattered all over Europe. And there are some indicators on how some of these ecosystems are being connected between them and how they can actually be better connected in the future. And I can tell you that from the proposed budget of the 500 millions, the way we see the organization of the future work program, there will be 4 main destinations, and one of these destinations is actually a consistent one. Is connectedness, and this connectedness actually has a very substantial part because it will have the highest number of calls inside this destination. It's a little bit of a different type of organization. It's going to be like destination. So innovation ecosystem will have 4 destinations: the EIC forum, the connectedness, the scaling up businesses in Europe, and data and meta-analysis. So in the connectedness part, the way it's being at least drafted in this very first, I would call it martyr version of the work program on which we are working now, taking into consideration also the inputs from the actors, it's going to have the highest number of calls. Of course, I cannot go into detail because I cannot disclose at this very moment what sort of calls and what sort of of information, but I can tell you that it's going to be a consistent budget. If you divide 500 million into 7, you'll have roughly, I don't know, 60, 70 million a year. And this, if you divide it then pretty much into two, because much of it will go into the so-called the Eurostars network, most likely. Again, it's not, don't take everything I'm saying as a nailed, because it's still under discussion, but let's say that we'll have 25, and 25 most likely there will be more than 10, 15 for connectness actions. And connectness actions actually are revolving around connecting both talents with requesting entities, or ecosystems, actors between themselves, or ecosystems between themselves in Europe. Well, yeah, I went a bit too much, but
no, but this is exactly what we want, and it's very good. So just to recap, there is an overall financial instrument. From that instrument, there is one specific that goes to ecosystems, and that ecosystems sub-instrument has different initiatives. Yeah, and a budget that will be allocated every year. So it was super clear. Thank you very much. I started already receiving some questions if moving event series would apply to this. And just to answer that question that just arrived from Frank Petri, this has already been the case in the past, and I would be surprised that it's not the case in the future. I know that the time is moving. It's going faster than expected, like always. One last point before I move to our panelists. What would be your recommendations for the ecosystem enablers to tap into these opportunities? Of course, knowing that you are a neutral body, but what have you seen in the past that has worked, and the type of ways of organizing future activities could be inspired from those pasts?
Well, I would mainly say one thing: be prepared. So what does it mean? You don't necessarily need to wait for the publication of calls to jump in and say, okay, this is my opportunity. Try to think one step ahead and be already prepared. At the moment that maybe the call is being published, you already have in mind a small consortia, a small number of partners that you would like to go ahead with, and you'll find you'll shape yourself rather on the existing and published opportunities rather than waiting for the opportunities to come. So this is more or less like Seneca was defining luck. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation, but opportunity without preparation might be useless, and the other way around also. So just be prepared. Basically, that's what I would advise, and I cannot probably say more than that. I just try to already foresee a little bit from what is being disclosed or existing or published, and then try to already make a plan and associate. So at the time the call comes and you are already having a let's say undefined plan, but at least you have a plan.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Razvan. And so now we are moving to the panelists, and I will start with Julia Fenart from France Digitale. And Razvan, please stay with us so that you can hear also what our ecosystem stakeholders have to say, and I will ask you from time to time also to jump into the discussion. So Julia, thank you very much for coming and be part of this webinar. So please tell us a bit about France Digitale. What is your purpose and your key activities, and then tell us a bit how your activities have been impacted by this pandemic, and how have you adapted? And yeah, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Razvan, and thank you also, Nicholas, for inviting France Digitale to join. A few words maybe to start about France Digitale for those who don't know our association. We are the largest startup association in Europe. We represent 1,500 digital startups in France, and we represent 100 VCs and business angels, so investors as well. Very good question on how the crisis has actually impacted our work. To be honest, what we did at France Digitale is that we took our to-do list and our plans and we put it in a garbage, And then we created a new to-do list to help actually startups really survive through the crisis. So basically, what did our new to-do list look like in times of coronavirus? I would say that the first thing was really extinguish the fire. That was our first priority, or at least try and contribute to do that. So it really consisted in reaching out to our communities of startups, asking them how they're doing, and then also reporting that to the government and to the European Commission, with also concrete proposals on which measures could be implemented to help them, and which emergency measures should be implemented. And sometimes also we provided really, let's say, accurate feedback on how measures pushed by government were not in reality implemented correctly. And I'm thinking about, for example, the government-backed loans that were sometimes, the idea was good, but in reality, startups didn't in the beginning have access to that. So we really helped with that process. I would say that the second thing on our new to-do list was really to help each other. First, helping startups navigate through these very uncertain times that we're going through. So for that, we published a startup rescue kit in French, but also for other European countries in collaboration with other startups network in Europe. We also held more than 30 webinars advising startups with experts on how to have access to partial employment, how to have access to government-backed loans, so these kind of things. So we really, of course, stopped physical events and went online. And also we launched, maybe you have seen that, we've launched under the umbrella United Tech of Europe, we have launched interactive maps detailing which measures were implemented on which member states to help startups. And actually, as France was the first country to implement ambitious recovery measures for startups, what happened is that many other startups associations came to us asking questions on what would we advise them to do in their countries, etc. So we really helped other countries, and we've seen that the UK and Ireland have sometimes almost copy-paste some measures that were implemented by France. So that was a very good European cooperation, the United Tech of Europe. And I would say third, and really to finish the last element on our to-do list, was really to look ahead and adopt a forward-thinking mindset, because, you know, there are opportunities in every crisis, and I think it really belongs to us to seize them. So last week we published a document called Alternatives, and it's a document containing 15 recommendations for a redirection plan of our economy and how we could better transform digitally the continent. So also, you know, see the bright side of things.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Julia, and we are keen into knowing more and also circulating that document. I go to Juliana from TechBBQ. So you had an event that was planned for September. So tell us a bit more about that barbecue. You are a bit more than a conference, but your main activity was a startup conference in Denmark, in Copenhagen. So for you, it was a huge impact. So how did you adapt it, and what are your plans as a big actor in the ecosystem in the Nordics?
Yeah, sure. As an event initiative, of course, we've been like deeply impacted. But our mission is above the event. Our mission is to support the ecosystem. And so the change in structure is that we needed to figure out other ways in which we can support the ecosystem, not with this big physical event. We can't replicate the atmosphere and the feeling of our event in a virtual event, but we can experiment with different things at this moment. So what we are doing, for example, is in a couple of weeks, we are hosting a virtual event to connect startups with investors. And it's very needed at this moment. Startups are desperate for investment. They need to keep going. And going back to what Razvan said, we are trying to connect capital and competence with this event. And it's an event fully curated by us. And we are already set to do another one of those in September. So instead of doing this big physical event that we had planned to do in September, we are doing a set of smaller physical or virtual and hybrid events, experimenting with new models, and obviously looking into still holding our physical event at a date when it is possible and safer.
Yes, there's nothing like face-to-face, and of course, and it's great to hear how you're adapting, because at the end, the main word that we will retain from here is about resilience and adaptation, right? So, Sandra, please tell us a bit how you have adapted. Of course, an incubator has a different model, and of course, when you need to select people to be part of your programs, there's also a part of face-to-face to also to give value. So how are you bringing value in your programs now?
Yeah, so it's definitely a face-to-face situation, because actually when we just started like several years ago as an accelerator, we were running like typical batches, you know, when people are staying with you for 8 weeks, like startups learning a lot and the stuff. At some point last year, we were running this Women in Tech batch. After the boot camp, we had like 35 fantastic startups founded by the female founders. But after the boot camp, we figured that some of them just can't join the program because, surprise, surprise, female founders sometimes have kids. And they're just unable to relocate, for example, from Finland to Lithuania for 8 weeks to be with us. And it was 2019. It was the moment when we started changing our programs, actually. And we rebuilt it completely. And we said, like, yeah, okay, so 1 week per month you are staying with us physically. And then 3 weeks we are doing everything online. This format just started working. We did our offline weeks. Everything was so great, and then coronavirus. And first 3 weeks, I think there was pretty a chaos on the market. First of all, from the side of like venture funds and investors and everyone, because no one actually understood what was going on, when it's going to end. We heard different projections. We made a survey with the investors, asking them, did you start to invest less or probably more? How do you see the perspective and everything? So when we got the first answers to the survey from the Western and Eastern European funds, the answers were that everything is going to be blown off like in September, probably by the end of the year. Now we understand that the impact is going to be much longer. And from the very beginning, when we saw the situation, we started planning that we are going to stay in an online mode till the end of the year. Additionally, we understood that our portfolio startups, now community startups, they're all over the world. And in some countries, it's better, like, for example, in Lithuania with the quarantine and coronavirus and everything. And in some countries like Spain, it's just a disaster. So we needed to support people like all the time. So we launched several initiatives. First of all, Startup Fridays. So every Friday we gather together with our startups for 2 hours. We normally have some sort of workshop for like 40-50 minutes or some invited guests. And after this, we just have a conversation. What are the challenges that the startups are facing, like how community can help them and everything. Secondly, we switched to online, our like offline weeks, we put them online. It was a little bit challenging, not because of the organizational part, but because of the simpler tools. I mean, tools for the video conferences and everything, they were just a little bit swamped and overwhelmed and stuff. And also we started to educate the ecosystem, because we figured that, for example, in Baltics, we have angel investors, and they're a little bit less experienced than the angel investors from the Western Europe. And we saw an opportunity. Okay, so everyone is sitting home now, and probably they would be willing, you know, to jump into some educational thing. Now we just finished our 2nd edition of the Business Angel School, and it's 1 month long. And now we're starting the 3rd one, because we just had a line of the angels who wanted to be educated. So crisis is both actually threats and opportunities, but we tried, you know, to kind of a little bit soften and smoothen the blow for the startups, and at the same time, like, continue going, keep going.
And thank you for that, Sandra. And it's also very important. What I like also in our panelists is that we are representing different regions in Europe. And so we are having also different perspectives on how this situation has impacted, and also measures that are being taking place now as we speak. So I will start now. I will go now to Julia, and also invite everybody in the webinar to also put comments on the Q&A. How do you engage online? Because I think that everybody, we are all ecosystem enablers, those who are attendees, but also those who are panelists. How do you engage online? How do you bring value online? Yeah. So do you have any success story that you want to share? And also, which is very important to learn, something that you will not do again because it didn't work.
Maybe I'll start with the, let's say, the bright side and the recommendations, and something that worked really well in terms of online engagement. You know, after a few weeks and months in confinement at France Digitale, we realized that sometimes, you know, there were too many webinars, there were too many online events. And then we started, you know, thinking about new formats. We realized that people wanted to hear also good news. They wanted to hear positive things. That's when we started focusing on our messages regarding talents and recruitment. So basically, we started sharing good news, and one of the main good news was that startups continued to recruit despite the crisis. So we're really demonstrating that they are important and solid economic actors in a society. And for that, we created a data set together with our community, with our members, and we actually gathered a list, a public list that you can find online, of startups that are continuing to recruit. So we have, at the moment in that list, we have 300 startups that are recruiting with more than 2,000 positions. And then we have also a list of potential candidates, people that are looking for jobs, that are looking to working for startups. And then, you know, at some point there is some matchmaking that can be done there. So I think I would really focus on that. Sometimes in terms of storm and crisis, send some light and some good news, and that worked really well.
Juliana, do you have any specific success story that you like to share with us, or something that you tried and didn't work in terms of online engagement?
I think for us, what really worked was being helpful. So whatever we shared online and whatever we were communicating to our community was relevant and helpful information for them to go through this moment of crisis. There would be talent lists, like Julia just mentioned, like startups that were still recruiting, and someone in our ecosystem created a list of talent that was available and startups that were still recruiting. And of course, there is some matchmaking to be done there. Obviously, the helping each other is a key thing. We only exist as a startup ecosystem if we are there for each other. We are a stronger ecosystem when we are there for each other, right? And I think this whole situation has taught us that very clearly.
Yeah. And so I will take a question from our attendees. So Sasha Liebman, he has very specific questions on what community management you are using and why. So this is for all the attendees. So are you using Slack, LinkedIn, Facebook groups, Mighty Networks, etc. And I will take another question that he made that is linked to that. So one, what are the tools? And two, what are the engagement formats that you are using to interact with the community and the ecosystem online? So one, tools, two, formats. Sandra, do you want to start? But then I will go also to Julia or Juliana. If you
Thank you. So we tried different tools. We tried Slack. Slack surprisingly didn't work for us, neither for startups nor for angel investors, strangely. So we decided to stick with Facebook. We have closed Facebook groups, both for startups and business angels. We have Facebook chats for some immediate communication with the community. We use Whereby for the webinars, and we use emails. So like in like regular social media for the announcements, I mean like LinkedIn, Twitter, like you name it. So more or less this. When it comes to the not tools, but the methods of building the community, this is interesting. We are still trying to figure out what works and what not, because we are used to building the community offline, which means that people can actually talk to each other, you know, like feel themselves with someone in the same space and everything. And building community online is completely different, especially given the fact that we are building a global community, not just European. So it's also people coming from different like time zones. What actually worked is making people talk to each other. Because initially they don't want to, so you create the environment, you create the situation where they have to share about their problems, because like when you're sharing your problems as a startup, and other startups kind of on the one hand see you vulnerable, and on the other hand they see you more humane and they're willing to help. So sharing problems and engaging with the people from all over the globe, I guess. Also, what's interesting about the community, normally, when we are talking about business angel investors, business angels invest close to their home and their country, right? And they also invest in people they actually know, they have seen live. So by building this business angel community, we managed to close several deals for our startups when we syndicated investors from different Baltic countries, those who never saw each other in person and actually never saw the startup in person. And this is some sort of the new normal. This is very rare.
Congratulations there, because access to finance, we know that it has dried up during this last few months. Juliana, do you want to tell us a bit on format or tools that you are using?
I think I can speak for another few events that I've been involved in organizing during the Corona times. We've organized Hack the Crisis Denmark, which was the biggest hackathon in Denmark. And I was also involved in the global hack and the EU versus virus hack with Isidro. And for those hackathons, Slack worked very well in managing the community, and also very surprisingly creating a community spirit that I didn't think it was possible to do virtually. It was very interesting to see people from all over the world collaborating and helping each other through this platform. So I would, yeah, Slack was the best for us. But then for TechBBQ, we use a lot of LinkedIn and Facebook to manage our community.
Julia, and on your side?
In addition to everything that has already been said, you see that I've sent a link to our Startup Rescue Kit, and you see that we've used a tool called Notion. The reason we used that, it was the most easy one to share information with the community. It's something that in our team at France Digitale, everyone could modify it, could add information, and that tool really responded to the immediate need of information and immediate need of regular updates. So that format is super flexible. So that was quite useful. Besides that, we used our newsletter a lot. So we communicated much more with our startups with newsletters sent almost every 2 or 3 days, so much more regularly. And I think for the rest of the tools, previous speakers have mentioned it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Razvan, I know that you have participated in the EU versus virus, so you have something to say about key learnings on engaging the community online, right? So have you discussed, or did you have already the time to discuss internally on what worked, what didn't work in engaging a community online?
Well, so far, I guess you are aware of the fact that the hackathon was followed by a matchathon, and the matchathon just finished last weekend.
Yeah.
Therefore, there wasn't too much time to discuss about what went wrong. But for sure, I can tell you that a lot of things went well. And as Juliana already well pointed out, the spirit of the community it could have been because of the emotion of the moment, or something really triggered a lot. I mean, basically, EU versus virus was the Guinness record type of hackathon online with more than 22,000 participants, the highest number of participants ever on a hackathon. And the way the community and the volunteers signed up and participated freely and gave their energy and time day and night, and I mean it literally in the night, the type of work that they were doing was extremely impressive. And yeah, we used this Slack, we used a lot of other tools which were, let's say, pledged and donated by the owners for accommodating large spaces, for accommodating large amount of people and so on. So all in all, it showed that in the face of such a situation of such a crisis, the community it's extremely helpful to each other and is extremely dedicated to donate everything from their time, from their energy, from their jobs, from their money, whatever, you name it. So that is a big learning for us. And it's not easy. It's extremely tiring. Such an organization, such a setting. Everybody is aware of that, and we have acknowledged that using these Slacks and using all type of tools that were just coming on, and Miro, and I mean, it's always you discover a new thing, and only the energy that you have to put into discovering how that works in itself is a challenge. So. So actually, E versus virus hackathon was itself a challenge, but I think it was an extremely successful challenge, and from such things we can learn a lot, and we can be much better prepared next time. And that is the essence, let's say, of such events, of such crises, which can become opportunities, as it was well mentioned before.
So thank you, and I'm moving, and please, all our attendees, you are welcome to post your questions. I will take now, I want to move a bit forward in the discussion and see what are your expectations also from the European Commissions, and also from what do you think is needed in the ecosystem to work now in the years to come. So I will start with our panelists. I will start with you, Sandra. What would be your top 3 priorities that you would expect, that you would ask to the European Commission, who is here today, about these ecosystems initiatives that will be in the next few years?
Well, actually, the first one was already being said about this connecting different ecosystems, because it's extremely important, especially during the time like this, because it's basically, if we'll have the second wave of coronavirus or something else is happening, whatever collapses in the countries, we just learned from a lesson that the only way to survive in this situation is to have this community. So connecting the communities is really important. The second one is funding, and I mean funding for the early stage startups, because in our region we have pretty big amount of different Series C, Series A VCs and so on. However, the very initial funding for the, let's say, idea stage, MVP stage, is not there yet. So the startups are somehow underfunded. In the European programs that we have in our region are mostly about R&D, where it's less development, more analytics and stuff like this. So funding for startups would be extremely helpful. And also all the initiatives that actually unite the like EU versus virus, which was really great, and which helped to a lot of startups meet people from other countries, like build the Uber community over like the already existing community, and it was really great.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And for you, Juliana, where are the priorities? Where the priorities should be?
I think funding, as Sandra said, is super important, but not only for the early stage startups, for the enablers, and that's exactly what we are discussing here today. Actually, speaking for TechBBQ, we are not-for-profit, and we spend roughly 70% of our time on getting funding. And if we could deploy that time and resource into actually creating initiatives to support startups, that would be a much better use of our time and resources. I think we would be able to help startups move into scale up stage. We would be able to create momentum. We would be able to support many more startups getting out of the seed stage into growth. But also there are a number of things, and going back to what Razvan was saying about competence and diversity and capital, I think there is a global scarcity of tech talent, and where the EU can help and mitigate that issue is also helping train and upskill more people, but making it easier and more attractive for tech talent to come to Europe and stay in Europe.
And this is the perfect transition for you, Julia, because I know that France Digitale, you have been really pushing very strongly about talent. So, but I don't want to take the priorities from your own mouth. So, what the priorities should be for you, Julia?
No, I can only endorse also what Julian and Sandra have mentioned. To start maybe with the funding part, I think at France Digitale, what we're really hoping for is for an ambitious European budget, and for the 500 million that you have mentioned, Razvan, we hope it could be 600 or 700. That's what we're really hoping for Horizon Europe or Invest EU to be a bit more consequent than the previous years, and contribute to increase access to funding to startups. So, of course, through the European Innovation Council. We also think that European Investment Bank and European Investment Fund could play a major role during the crisis and after the crisis. So definitely, I would say funding an ambitious European budget would be a number one. And of course, France Digitale, and as you've mentioned, Nicholas, has been working for years now on the issue of talents, on matchmaking talents with startups, going abroad and trying to contribute to the European soft power in bringing back some brains that went, to the Silicon Valley or other countries. And we've created some very efficient initiatives that are called Tech for Values, because we believe that the values that we're carrying in Europe might be a game changer to attract talents from abroad. So we believe that there is a third way for attracting talents. So definitely there are a lot of things that we could do together collectively on that. So definitely, as Juliana said, we hope for also an ambitious digital literacy plan, as all these things go, of course, hand in hand. And I would say maybe a last thing that has not been mentioned yet, but I think that also the Green Deal and the environmental transition goes hand in hand with digital transition as well. And we know, we've seen that European Innovation Council has been bridging the two with trying to bridge innovation and Green Deal, AI and Green Deal. And I think this goes really in the right direction. There are a lot of money put at the table at the moment by the European Commission for the recovery plan, and that's great. At France Digitale, we believe that sometimes some of this cash must be made conditional on green engagements and or on digital transition and engagements as well. But yeah, I would say these three things are maybe the priorities we'd like to focus on.
Thank you, Julia. And Razvan, I'm going, we have a lot of questions for you. So we have a limited amount of time, so I will try to regroup them. So first, from Christine Tartenson, I don't know if I'm pronouncing well the family name, but she's asking you, how will the EU Horizon future funds and projects support implementation of the data strategy that was published in February? And how the 3 C's that you mentioned will articulate with this data strategy? Do you have already an idea, suggestion on how these 3 C's can support this data strategy?
No, I do not have right now a proper answer to that, but what I can tell you is that one of the destinations foreseen within the work program of the innovation ecosystems is so-called the data. And this data is the idea of having such a destination originates in the fact that data and indicators are very often outdated or missing in the effective monitoring and evaluation of measures in general in the field of innovation ecosystem. So that's why actually this will have a dedicated destination which will have probably a package of calls that will address exactly that type of things.
Yes, thank you. And also there was another question. Where will the report that you were mentioning will be available? It will be available, presumably, in the European Commission website, and when?
Yes, once it's being endorsed by the high hierarchy, because I have it now. This morning I've been working on it, and yesterday, I mean, in the finalization, it will be available and it will be disseminated. Actually, I mean, Julia, le French Tech and la France Digitale and all these were stakeholders in our consultations, and a lot of universities and the umbrella organizations of these universities, such as, I don't know, the European University Association and so on, they were part of it, and they will get it as umbrella organizations, also incubator accelerators, business representatives, and they will disseminate it among their communities. But very likely it will be also on a web page, on a public web page. So it's going to be, the moment it's being released, you'll probably hear about it anyhow from somewhere.
So thank you. And the last question that we have for you is that they hear from Pernille Corson that they hear from their startups that the go-to-market is the most difficult, and looking at the full EU market is very difficult. Yeah, a lot don't see that as a possibility at all. Maybe because of the fragmentation of language that I'm adding here, part of the question. So how can the EU help with this to bridge that gap to go and tap fully into the single market?
Yes, this is an issue that we are
for all the other panelists also.
Yes, this is going to be addressed mainly via the EIC forum, and the EIC forum is actually an informal forum that will gather public authorities, in particular public authorities that are in charge of innovation policies in different countries, to try to meet on an informal platform on a very specific thematic work groups, let's say innovation friendly regulation or sandboxes or things like that. Via there they will address these issues, so trying to normalize normalization is a very technical term, is to harmonize the various policies, local policies, national policies, so it can be inclusive for other entities, because we are aware of this fragmentation, and is both language and cultural fragmentation that is a serious problem. But this has to be addressed a little bit at a higher level, and try to land on a common ground of understanding. And if this can be discussed in an informal manner and then be translated into policies that can enable and nurture this cross-border integration, that's the way to go, basically.
So from our other panelists, Juliana, Julia, or Sandra, do you have any comment on this, on how to support a real go-to-market all across Europe, and what are the activities that you are taking on initiatives in that sense? Do you want to start, Julia, maybe?
I mean, I think, of course, the fragmentation of the continent of the 27 is probably one of the major obstacles. And there are some things that are being implemented and will be implemented to seek greater harmonization. At France Digitale, there are some things like stock options that we believe should be further harmonized. For example, we believe that the issue of tech visas and making it easier for foreigners to come and work in the EU in different countries should be made easier. You know, all the fiscal paperwork, even in terms of GDPR, sometimes data is not, and the issues around data, not all countries have the same interpretation of that regulation, and sometimes can be a struggle. So I would definitely send you to check our document called Alternatives and some of the recovery measures that we've proposed to the European Commission. But it's definitely one of the major obstacles. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and also, and thank you for that, Julia, and also the fact that the Commission is looking to connect different ecosystems. This is also to answer this question on how to go to market and tap into the potential of the single market, right? So having a more interconnected ecosystem can help companies from different ecosystems to tap into this big market, which is the biggest and wealthiest market that exists in the world. We are arriving to the end of our webinar. We have 5 last minutes, and I would like us to wrap up. I've heard a lot of very exciting words and ideas about connection, about resilience, about adapting online, Green Deal. So let us now conclude and say where should we focus in the next month to build a very solid ground for all these intentions to happen. So one priority for each one of the panelists where all of us ecosystem enablers should focus in the next few months to make this happen in the next decade.
I can start that one. I think we are at the point with all that's happened over the past few months where we were given the opportunity to rethink the system. And we urgently have to do that. Our system is geared towards growth, and infinite growth is not possible. We cannot rely on that. So maybe it is time for us to think of how we can create incentives so that growth is not the main priority anymore. How can we switch the old glasses and focus on impact instead, maybe, rather than growth. And the EU can definitely support that through policies that support impact rather than growth. So I think that is one of the things we should focus on for the next years. Yeah.
I can actually endorse that, because I can tell you that, in fact, already since our new commissioner, Mrs. Gabriel, came in the office, pretty much the focus has shifted, and we say that impact is the new excellence. So the KPIs are not necessarily excellence in the classical term, but rather also in the impact that the project or actions in Europe will have at certain places and in the lives of the citizens.
So I like that one. Impact is the new excellence. Sandra, and then Julia to conclude.
Yeah, I totally agree with Juliana about impact. It's also about sustainability, like building this path to sustainability, whether it's startups, whether it's corporations. Additionally to this, I would say we should support and endorse startups who are trying to comply with the UN sustainability goals and who are moving towards the UN sustainability goals, because at the end of the day, if we are talking about the decade, these are actually the market players that can significantly change something in terms of starting from women in tech up to actually climate change and education for the young people that don't have an access to the education and everything. So this is the new trend. It's not about unicorns anymore. It's about sustainability and impact.
Yeah. So sustainability, impact. Julia, last word before I conclude.
No, I think the crisis really made us realize something that we suspected, of course, for a long time, is that we really, really rely on foreign tech giants. And I think really the time has come for us to put all the conditions needed to really make our European tech giants. And I think, you know, this discussion and the money invested by the European Commission will definitely help that, and that's a good thing. And you know, at France Digitale, we're always happy to help in thinking about proposals and ideas to achieve these goals. So don't hesitate, anyone, to reach out.
Yes, connectedness, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I want to thank everybody, and especially Juliana, Julia, Sandra, and Razvan for making it and speak today, but also all the attendees who send us their questions. I hope we managed to answer all of them. If not, please send us and we will try to give you more information. It was very instructive, really. I really enjoyed the discussion, the different perspective that you all brought to the discussion. We will have very busy months and hopefully years to really achieve the impact that we want. I want to stay with that word impact and connectedness. For me, these are the two very important words. And all of us, we have a role to play as ecosystem enablers and as network players. And really, I want to invite everybody to stay tuned, to really contribute to this European connection and making sure that we could take our tech ecosystem to the next level. So thank you very much to our speakers. You can connect with us also on our online channels, and of course send us your comments on how we can improve and how we can make better and even more impactful events and webinars and initiatives. Thank you very much.